Bobby,
No,
it's good, Bobby. Phil is good to
yeah, we me and him almost the same. We connected at the hip.
It's good to have you here in the studio with us for a little while this afternoon.
It's good to be
And it's always interesting to allow you to take us on these voyages into the inner world of our spirit, because it has so many different dimensions. I had the pleasure of speaking with Sister Sabonfu, Melodoma's wife, and she dealt in the world of the African before the European, and she talked about ritual, and it sounded a lot like magic when she talked about her village and the rituals and the reason for rituals, and then going into rituals, they were able to go into other worlds. And what I saw was that African people lived in an entirely different world. The one thing I found that I wish she had dealt with more forcefully with, and this is what I was going to say to you downstairs, is that I asked her to describe more or less the spirit that we're dealing with. Obviously, this European is not the same as we are, and he has brought both death to our physical world as we know it, even destroyed our mental capacity to see our world as we saw it, by taking away our language, our culture, and that was really forcefully done. But we are dealing with death to our world and to us. And I asked her if she would describe what kind of spirit we're dealing with. And I want to ask you the same question, because she did say that we were dealing with a spirit of death, you know, of destruction, that it was not. It was a completely alien spirit. But then when I asked her, how would we kill it, she laughed and she said we would have to heal it. And that's where we parted company. But I mean, that's
it's the same thing, actually.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, all right. What are we dealing with? And I'm asking you the same question.
Yeah.
First, though, what are we really dealing with? It is not us. It's not the same. How different is it? Why is it different? And talk about that differences.
Well, you have to just take it in stages. You said something very pertinent about ritual. And ritual is the device by which we focus or transcend or cross over from what is temporal to what is trans-temporal. In other words, ritual is the bridge to the realm of myth. And the realm of myth is actually the true history of the spirit. See, the Caucasoid locks us into this physical illusionary history and tells you that myth is something that is the machination or the creation of the imagination of our humanity, when actually it is actually the interpretation by the spirit of its own physical adventure. So when we do ritual, we cross the bridge between the realm of illusion and into the interpretation that the spirit has of the physical world. And we were living more in the spiritual world because as a people we were more into ritual. And thus by that we had a greater ability to see things before they happened. Because in the realm of myth or in the realm of the metaphysical worlds, all things physical are the byproduct of the metaphysical world. So we lived in the world of metaphysics. We lived in the trans-temporal world, and we crossed the bridge from our illusion back to our reality when we did ritual. The spirit of what it is that you say, how do you kill the spirit? And she says, well, you kill it by healing it. She's right. When we heal ourselves of our focus into and participation, or the need to participate in the world of illusion that he continues to keep and refining and continue to keep making more pleasant and appealing for us to participate in, once we secede or retract our participation in the world as he is giving it to us, his world crumbles. Once we begin to transcend the temporal world that he has fashioned and go into the trans-temporal world through our rituals, we begin to connect up to a whole other universe of realities that our ancestors first laid down. Now you have to also look at it. He is another creature frequency. He is another creative frequency identity. He is, just to, I don't know, he has offended us in the past by our blackness. So I'm going to reverse that field and talk about something that would look like it's offensive, but it is offensive. When the Caucasoid studies diseases, he sees that most of the diseases that start up as a result of the incursion of white blood cells. White blood cells actually come into play in your body when a disease is present. So let's look at that scenario. When the white man came to prominence, obviously the body of the black consciousness must have been diseased. So the only way that a disease or a response to the disease could take over a whole body is if that body was somehow in decay to begin with. So the natural progression to a diseased state would be nature responding the way she does in microcosm as she does in macrocosm. So if we look at a microcosmic response to diseases as the evidence of leukocytes or white blood cells, as we call them, they become evident when you see disease happening. Now, overload of these white blood cells would create leukemia. So you see people dying from leukemia because there's an overload of white blood cells. For instance, when you eat a piece of pork, your white blood cell count rises to the level of a person who has leukemia. That's correct. So if you eat a piece of pork and you wait for a while and then draw blood, there would be enough leukocytes and white blood cells in your system that if nobody knew any better, they would say that you have a leukemic situation. So something had to happen to the physical reality of what we call people of color, our melanated brothers and sisters. It either had to be the ending of a time, or the wearing out, or the end result, or the epilogue. Let's just say this. The epilogue to our spiritual journey in the flesh as people of color was our cessation from the illusions that we were participating in. And as that body died for our lack of participation in it, in came the white man. And just like any other destructive cancerous cells, because if you look under the microscope, you would look at the white man, you would look at the cancer cell and you would see that it was white. So if all cancer cells in microcosm are white, if all things that are dead show up to be, and we don't even call him white, I call him recessive. So they're not the white people, they're recessives. And we call them by what they are by classification. They are recessives. They are the recessive component of humanity. And they cannot be, or they cannot create a dominant structure. They can only create a destructive structure because they come from a recessive strain. So a recessive strain cannot create a dominant consciousness that will take us forward. You're right when you're saying, what is this spirit? The spirit is our lack of attention to this plane. I believe that our ancestors went forward to a whole other reality, and that a lot of us were the rear guard to keeping this realm stable so that the journey to Amenta could go along smoothly. We took the brunt of the disease that came upon this planet to make it, to block the entrance for the disease to come any further than us. We had to take everything that this Caucasoid took at us because our people before us had to set up a structure, had to set up a consciousness place, had to set up a territory, a village, had to put down stakes in a whole other reality that we are yet to inherit. And when we do make our going across, whenever we say our going home rituals, I believe that there's a whole other resonance that we go and participate in than he does. I don't see him participating in the same resonant zone of consciousness as our people, because I believe you go where your experience takes you. Mm-hmm. And I believe that whatever your experience are, you can quantify experience under suffering. You say all those who suffered would have to go here. All those who have not felt any suffering in their life would have to go there, because you go according to your energy merit. This Caucasoid, this recessive, has come to play or come to being because whatever it is that we left after our great societies were in crumbling, were in fall, were coming down, all of that was a transitional phase for us to go to the next phase of our consciousness. He had to come in just like any other scavenger and do what he could to set up what was left.
Now, more specifically, perhaps you can describe him so that we will see him and perhaps understand a physical manifestation of this.
That's interesting.
But can you describe it in a way that we can get a better picture?
Yeah, it would have to us going back to his, to studying his behavioral traits, going way back. I mean, back to the Vikings, back to where it is that he claims he comes from.
And when was that?
And that's in the code. We're not even going to look at his charts. He came from the code. Time, as far as we know, his time started when he began to know that there was other parts of the world. Now, it was funny how the Europeans have this thing where they say they've studied Christopher Columbus and found out that he just found out, and the group found out there was a whole other world other than Europe. Yet still, if you go back into the archives of our people in Africa, even the ones over here in the Americas, they knew about all of other civilizations living on the other side. They had an interconnection. He was the only one that seems to have been isolated and had to now reach out to the rest of the world to find his place in this whole mosaic. There are no pyramids in Europe. He never put down any stakes for pyramids. He never built any temples. The temples you see in Greece were built by the Africans. The places in China, all done by people of color. Everywhere he goes on this planet to look for himself, he keeps bumping into us. So he has no place. Okay, let's look at his behavior before that. The history of his behavior has been put down by his own people. He talks about us being savages, but he did not recognize a high spiritual culture when he first saw it. He came upon Africans, he came upon so-called Native Americans all around, and he saw, well, they're just there in their skins, or they're just there in huts, or they're just dressed in this. He did not recognize a high spiritual technology. That's it. So he, in his own consolidated, isolated, calcified consciousness, began to make an assessment of the world based upon his own reptilian reaction to it. And that he's functioning from his reptilian brain, not from his frontal lobes where our ancestors functioned from, but he functioned from his lower brain, which meant egotism, a kind of consolidated, quantified form of culture that saw no room for anything else. That was his mentality. And you take that mentality now and you try to fit it into the broader world view of the fact that the world was a unit, a nature that was part of everything and everything a part of it. He did not have that. He came into the world thinking that he had to conquer because he came from a world where his survival was based on conquest.
Are you saying he is physically and spiritually and mentally different from the African?
Completely in the fact that his whole calcified view of the world, the fact that his pineal, the fact of his lack of melanin, the fact that he has calcification around a component of the brain that was necessary for intercommunication with nature. If that's calcified, even if he did get information coming through that instrument, it would still have been distorted based on the calcification. And you remember, calcium is an electrical conductor. But if the calcium is not structured in a proper crystalline matrix and lattice, you get a distorted picture of everything. So even the use of calcium was overbearing because the calcium shut down his pineal gland. His skin no longer had any form of color to be able to pick up light and to translate light as information. Mm-hmm. So if you can't pick up light from the very source of life, which is the sun, and translate that into the inspiration that would come from light codes, then you are now functioning from pure instinct, from pure reptilian brain perception. Mm-hmm. He now takes that and he forms a culture around that reptilian mentality. Mm-hmm. And he is now struck out because some news have come to him that there are worlds and lands beyond him. I don't understand. You think about this. How could you look up at a full moon and believe that you live on a flat earth?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you didn't connect the two together.
But that's what I'm saying.
If you didn't see one as a replica of
that's what I'm saying.
The other one.
He had no interconnectionness with the fact that if that's what's there, then they would probably looking back at us this way. He thought that the world, the earth, was the center of the universe and that the sun moved around him. So his whole understanding of the mosaic didn't come until he began to strike out and find his identity amongst those who lived the identity of spirit. Nothing spiritual ever came out of Europe. Nothing. So anything that he claims to be spiritual about himself, he took based upon a second-hand participation and experience with peoples of color. And as you look at him today and what he has shown us, you are looking at a man that over the last 500 years began to find his humanity and his interconnectedness with everything on this planet based upon his interfacing and interplay with peoples of color. Mm-hmm. He has not known humanity until he understood and began to see what humanity was in a working dynamic. Because you look at where he came from. He was the true savage. He was more of a sophisticated savage. He learned how to deal with his own disease state by coming up in disease. That's why he is so preoccupied with that which is deformed. With that which is, where we as Africans would drown a deformed baby knowing that that child could come back into another spirit. Mm-hmm. He would nurture the deformity because there was something in him that he knew genetically and psychologically that was already deformed. And Dr. Francis Cress-Welsing put it very well when he said that the white skin was related to that story of Adam and Eve. That when he saw he was naked was actually the loss of his actual spectrum, his ability to see his color, and his relatedness to the world of color, where everything around us is based on programming, based on color. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So to look at him now where he is, now that he's had a chance to participate, to assimilate, to, like a vampire, draw the blood of civilization into his own veins, he now has the semblance of a human. Hueman. Mm-hmm. You see? But who he is, he keeps slipping back to. Now here I have a problem with. I have a problem with the Caucasian writing all of the New Age information to tell me that somehow everything is all right now, it's all been paid, we can move forward into a higher level of spirituality. That is completely off the hook for me because everyone knows that there is a cause and effect. There is always something that has to happen as a result of the action coming from one place. There has to be an effect coming from another. In the literature today, where people are reading thousands of books by the New Age people talking about the spiritual ascension and how our DNA is going to get its 12th helix and all of this nonsense, I'm trying to figure out that how is the most deficient, degenerated, recessive, and completely anemic and colorless creature on the planet going to be given keys, biological keys, that, and the natural order of progression, remember, because he says that all of his technology is light-based. All of the new technologies coming out is going to be light-based. If he, by his own very biological nature, is one who reflects light, who cannot absorb light, who cannot even stand under the one natural lamp that the Most High has put up for us, how is he going to presume to know what it is that all of this is going to mean when the time comes for us to make that quantum shift? He is speculating based upon what he is studying of us. But the components he gathers in the form of information cannot be quantified and then synthesized into the wisdom necessary for us to understand what it is that's getting ready to happen. The only people that can do that have been the interpreters of spirit all along, and that's us. We interpret spirit for him through our music, through our dance, through the very language, even though perverted. We have brought the soul to his very language. We have put the life into his communication. And he knows that. That's why our music is the one that is the popular music. The music that everyone can identify with. Because we are the original ones. He knows that. And he can't communicate spirit the way we do. He didn't even write the, for instance, Mozart. Mozart simply put his name on what was then Moorish music. You see, he belonged to a secret society over there. And what they would do is study the old Moorish paradigm to begin to fill up the gap that had happened, especially in the Renaissance. The Renaissance was actually going to the East to pull out the information that was suppressed in the West. That's all it was. And I don't even call it the West because the Caucasoid or the recessive is not from a Western culture. We got to really re-identify that. I believe that Western society, as we know it, perished when Columbus came here.
Correct.
So we have to look at him as a Nordic society, as an Iceman society, and really identify him for who he is, because he has insinuated himself into the identification or the languaging, and has placed himself, based on language, into specific categories of identification. And by him placing himself in those spaces of identification, we now, on a very humble and very nonchalant, we embrace his identification of himself, and then we apply that to our dialogue. And he is not a Western civilization. He is not even a civilization, because even our high priest, Dr. John Henry Clark, said the operative word in civilization is civil. And he has never been civil. So he does not have a civilization. He has an imposition of activities that he imposes upon people that he meets. But he doesn't civilize anyone. He hasn't even civilized himself.
You said a little earlier that our ancestors transitioned this plane and went to prepare a world to receive us, but some stayed behind to take on this Caucasoid, etc. But I just doesn't that sound a little bit like the Bible? I shall go and prepare a place for you, and ain't that kind of like life after death, and ain't that kind of like looking into heaven for a better place and not dealing politically with the realities down here. How do you juxtapose that in a way of winning the battle here on earth?
Well, the Bible again is a mutilated version of our mythos. So if you see them talking about going to prepare a place, it doesn't mean that our ancestors did not write it. It's just that he's interpreting it differently. Going to prepare a place simply means that there is a condition of thought, a condition of being that we must ascend to by our disconnection from participation here. The metaphysics of a reality is based upon how you participate in your perception of that reality. The reality becomes reinforced by your thought process and how thought is used to reinforce the reality. We as people of color, or I would say the last guard, the ones who were left here to receive back whatever it is in our interpretation, to be the gatekeepers so that nobody else can get through this shit unless they were prepared. We as the gatekeepers of that information, we have been told, or we have been given by this language a whole new identification process for reality. We were stripped of the language that decoded reality for us.
Correct.
By that stripping, we were now given a reality that was based upon a calcified pineal gland. The language is based upon that type of thing. It does not have, like what the Dogon says, the 3-4 sides to a particular... When you say a sentence, the Caucasoid or the recessive looks at the sentence and he just looks at the front view. He doesn't look at the side or the back or the top or the bottom of that sentence. And that there are 3 and 4 dimensions to that. When I say go forward and not dealing with political reality, the political reality is the illusion. And by our dealing with it, we reinforce it. When you pull the plug on this machine, can it work anymore?
Not without
the power source. The power source is your attention. The Caucasoid, the recessive, needs our attention. He is constantly vying to keep you focused on him.
What does that do? How does that...
That's the beauty of the metaphysics. Do you realize that you can... Do you know that you can inflict pain on a child? When you see a child doing something of mischief in the corner, and you look at a child with a specific glare, do you know that you've sent an energy right to that child's eyes and that child's brain? And that maybe about another 3 to 4 days from then, the child's nose will start running, the child will start sniffling. That evil eye energy. The value of attention is that whatever information I put in is overloading your circuits so that the chemistry of the brain is preoccupied with what was just put in as the information. The chemistry of the brain cannot switch attention if the attention of the eyes and the brain is not taken away from what has been forced to pay attention to. So your very chemistry, the very enzymes, the very electrical and magnetic input and output of your mind is being constantly preoccupied with an overload and saturation of bullshit information. So whatever it is that keeps coming in, the body has to keep calibrating, keep like a stew inside, keep cooking the proper chemicals so that the memory and whatever it is you want to put in your mind becomes lodged in, and all the chemistry for higher consciousness, all the chemistry for what you would use to figure out what the real deal is, all being preoccupied on well, let's just use it for instance.
Well, let's look at television and throw television in and the damage it does and what it does. Watching, because black people watch a lot of television.
But they don't watch it intelligently. They watch it as because they don't understand that it's going right past the filter of their discrimination. The discrimination filter is right past it. The discrimination between what is relevant and what is not relevant no longer there. Because everything, the overload, now you've become so hypnotized by the overload that they just punched through your resistance. And what I was saying, say like you say Calgon lotion or Tide, all of these, you have a saturation of information, and your chemistry is being overloaded with all kinds of bullshit information, non-essential, that when it comes to you to try to sit down and concentrate, the chemistry of the mind, just like the camera, it takes, like you want to develop a picture, for instance. When you develop a picture, it's just something that's on a film, right? And you put it in there, and you want to put it on a piece of paper. You got to do whatever you do to put the piece of paper in, and then what you do is you got to put it through what? A series of chemicals before you can develop it. Well, that's the same thing with your memory. Your body, your memory goes through all this so that you begin to develop the picture, to file it in the inventory of your mind. Now, what they're doing is using what would be a developing mechanism for higher consciousness and learning. They're overloading it with all kind of bullshit information. And then what you do is you can't abide by silence anymore. You have been so drugged by the chemistry of your body, constantly processing bullshit information, that the drug of processing information makes you seek out distractions. Whereas when I shut down everything, and I say, no more this, boom, we're not going to talk, we're not going to do this, we're going to sit still, you bug out. Because you've been programmed to take in, to have input constantly. So you have no time to think about your condition. All you are doing is reacting, reacting, reacting. What does he do when you don't pay attention anymore? He shoots 2 or 3 of our brothers in the streets. He got your attention now. When you say, well, you look like you want to go off into another direction, and we're going to raise up, we're going to buy another direction, and we're going to raise up, we're going to buy our own land, get our own crop. He does something over here. It is constantly to take your attention off of what the real deal is, and that is giving him the attention. When you draw your attention from him, when we shut down all our lights, like I said at the last gathering, you shut down all your lights, you don't go to work for 2 or 3 weeks. You say in your mind, I do not want to live this way, so I will die according to my own rules and regulations. I will no longer live the way he wants me to live so that he can thrive and flourish. Once I pull the plug on everything, I know there are going to be some casualties. But what's going to happen to him when I don't pay attention to him anymore? His true nature will come out. He will either have to beat us on the head and start eating us, which will then show him his own savagery, because right now his savagery is contained. Everything in the news has a censor, and the censor is the news anchor man. He is telling you what you're supposed to see, even though you're looking at the picture and you can get another interpretation. When you look at the news, shut the voice off and look at the news without the voice, and you'll see 2 different things. So he is interpreting your world for you because he's got you paying attention. And if you interpret the world the way he hasn't told you it is, that means he's got your attention. So if you're looking at the fact that black people got a whole lot of problems because white people is this, and because y'all don't do this, and y'all got a lot of crime, and y'all parrot that same thing, boom, he's got your attention. Because that's not what's real.
And that attention gives him life?
Gives him life and power. Because just like any other vampire, he needs the light of your attention to survive.
That's a pretty heavy statement. In other words, you were saying it is our energy focused on him. But then how would you explain him coming into Africa and totally conquering Africa so much that he was not in the interior of Africa, and yet we sold ourselves and raided ourselves and helped him bring us to destruction?
You have to remember that everything that's done, if you speed it up, fast forward it, you will see it. There's almost an intelligence at work. Now, I remember people say, well, damn, you think we needed to be slaves? No. Remember I said at the beginning that all diseases, when a body goes through disease, let's just talk about your physical body. When your body goes through a disease, it's going through a process. And you, by the process, based on the way the white or the Caucasoid or the recessive works, he wants you to hurry up to the process because he wants to put you back on his timetable. But disease is a process of health. And that the way that you defeat disease is by allowing it to come out. That's the secret. The secret is the barbarism and the madness and the New World Order and all that. That's the pimple getting ready to be raised up on the skin. You ain't know what's underlying in your body until the body raises that pimple to the surface. Then you know you got problems in your body. Mm-hmm. This Caucasoid is the zit of the planet. And everything he has done, he has taken violence, mayhem, and chaos to a new and scientific level, which intrinsically was what was actually begun by our lack or misdirection or misapplication of our spiritual selves. Mm-hmm. So we say, well, the black people created? Yes, we created him. Because whatever it is that we did to forget who we really were, ended up being him. Because who is he except everything that we have forgotten about ourselves, or what we really refuse to face in ourselves and refuse to do. So now, if we don't realize that the attention is not him, the attention to the disease, for instance, somebody says, a good friend of mine, not really good, but a very close acquaintance in what I did back in the natural healing world when I was with Heal Thyself. She just passed away of what was cancer. We look at the localized area of the body. For instance, if you have cervical cancer, and we look at cervical cancer, and immediately, according to the Caucasoid or the recessives, they attack where the disease expressed itself. And then they even give a name to it, cervical cancer. But it's not cervical cancer. That is just the place where the body chose to exteriorize the mental process that destabilized the body's homeostasis and brought it out at that area. This is where most of the thought processes would have localized itself in order for it to have worked itself out. But it is the total body. It is the total body we're speaking about. So when you bring that full circle, it is not the white man as being the problem. It is us, the total body of the black man, that needs to be dealt with on a whole. Not in a fragmented level. But what you do is, the distraction is the cervical cancer. So we look at the cervical cancer not realizing the cause of the problem was what was being done to the total body in the first place.
I think this might be a good place. I want to come back to some other issues. In particular, I want to deal with the last gathering of the masters down in Atlanta, but I want to hold that to the end. But I think this is a good place to segue into health. I actually, to look at health, we were talking over the phone, and you were explaining how the African, more or less, we dealt with the tree. And if the tree was actually drawing all of the nutrients from the earth, and pretty soon it would deplete. Well, the earth does become depleted of minerals when you oversaturate it with a particular plant or so forth. But you explained something I thought was extremely important, and I want to tie that into what you were saying right now in terms of the whole body health and this mental health being expressed through, degenerate condition. But looking at light, who we are, how we take in nurture, what is this body and how does it function in terms of its organs and its nutrition, its electromagnetic fields, and etc. I just found what you were saying was extremely different and interesting, and perhaps we can talk about that.
You said something about the tree. We can go back to the scenario of the tree, and we think that the tree.
Yeah, we were looking at those big redwoods, so I could identify the tree so you get a better picture.
Better picture it, yeah. And for the people who would view this tape, to understand that we are not made of food, and that another part of our misuse of attention, for want of a better phrase, is that we are somehow creatures of food. That without food, we don't live. And that, of course, is part of the illusion. That's part of the recessive paradigm. Why I say that is because if you look at the dynamics of a tree, as we explained before, something like a redwood that's the size of this room or twice the size of this room, you could drive a truck through one of the trunks. If you look around at the ground that redwood has grown in, there are no indentations or no removal of soil. No depletion of soil, nothing, but yet still you have a 300-foot tree, which is enormous. How is that? Well, the principle of life is not what the recessive paradigm has factored it or perceived it to be. When a tree is in the ground, three things are in operation. First of all, the life form itself and how it processes life to become life. It is a seed, and once planted in the ground, certain electromagnetic energies triggers its potential within. Okay, that potential has a genetic coding that makes it operate unconsciously and automatically in a specific way. It automatically begins to set down roots by which to anchor itself. Once it has anchored itself, it begins to sprout its way through the surface of the soil and then begin to use what we see as water and sunshine to begin to grow. Now, our perception is that somehow this tree who has planted down roots is taking minerals from the soil in order to grow. And that it's taking water from the soil in order to grow. And that with sunshine, water, and the minerals from the soil, this tree grows. No. Because we are not taught life and the dynamics of that invisible component of life, we are looking at the surface, we are looking at the illusion, we are looking at the veneer, what the Kabbalah expresses as the clip-off, which is nothing more than the shell. And we are identifying a whole science around a series of shells and surface perceptions. The anchor of the root in the ground is simply to anchor the living entity in the ground so that it sets up an electromagnetic current or a circuit in order to get the real food that it was meant to nurture itself on, and that is air and light. When the roots are anchored in the ground, what you see as the minerals simply is there to set up the charge so that the conduction of electricity is more proficient. So minerals are not there to give any kind of nutrition. It's simply there to set up the charge for you to conduct life and light through the breath and through the light. It is a way for channeling that electromagnetic current more efficiently through the body that is being created. But if it was about eating the minerals, then the whole soil would have been destroyed around that tree. You see, it is not that the minerals are actually created. The minerals for the tree are created by the sun and the air and the water that is falling down. The water is simply the conductor. Making sure that what is inert in the inorganic materials, when the water hits the inorganic materials, that is the conduit. That's the conductor for whatever electromagnetic energy needs to get up into the tree. That's all it is. But the life component that's there in that tree is not in that ground, because if it was, how is it that there are minerals in the leaves, minerals in the bark, and minerals on the stems that don't exist in the ground? See? They're not thinking, what made those minerals in the leaves that don't appear in the ground? Now, you say that it needs the minerals. No, it only needs a couple of minerals, because the minerals that it needs to set up the charge. That's all it needs. Once it breaks through the surface, its next and only thing it needs is the sun and the air.
And water.
Yeah, the water is just to make sure that electromagnetic connection that it has to the earth is being conducted in there so it can anchor itself to the earth to get its real food source. It becomes conscious of itself by the amount of room it has. It even battles for space with other trees. Now you take that particular philosophy and you understand how that works, and you see the human being, which is no farther from the tree, because in the Hindu we are called Saptapana, which means man plant. So as a man plant, our first and foremost quote unquote nutrition was the sun. All minerals that you see made, all plants, everything alive that has an organic reality gets its life from the sun. Let's break down what the sun is. The sun, light. What is light? You break it down into photons, electrons, atoms, protons. Do they eat? No. The sun doesn't eat. Nothing eats that is light. It is simply a variation on the theme that we call God. And that variation on the theme is you as well. But your focus of attention has created such an envelope of ignorance that you eat and participate in the reality of your own creation. So the original cell that created you, what they identify in doctors identify as the germ cell, that's the original seed component that brought you into being, and that had nothing to do with food. Your sperm cell ain't got nothing to do with food. The egg cell ain't got nothing to do with food. And those are the two original seeds that you come from. Where you grow up into being a baby in that stomach, that ain't got nothing to do with food. Everything your mother takes in is to just set the charge so that the breath that your mother is breathing in, which contains all the solar energy that is in the air, she's breathing that in and creating you. Now when you come out, you begin to nurture certain addictions that the society and the culture gives you. And you begin to eat according to that, and that's when you create another body. The other body is called the soma body, S-O-M-A. That somatic body now is the body that eventually ages and dies. Because if you look at your nerves of a 98-year-old person, the nerves of a 98-year-old man is the same as a 10-year-old child. What is aging? What is aging and dying is the somatic body. The somatic body is a body that's made of psychological problems.
The body is made of psychological problems?
The somatic body that ages and gets diseases. The somatic body that goes through all the changes that we call illness and pathologies. That somatic body is built up on the cultural identification of pain, joy, pleasure, suffering. And you train the appetites of the cells, and the cells create each other according to the appetites that you create.
Other words, and I've heard Dr. Amos Wilson say this, is that when we come into our true selves, real liberation, our bodies will change.
Oh yes. In a twinkling of an eye.
We will not have these bodies.
Nope. And that's why I wanted Doc with me before he made his going over. Because we spoke for a while on the phone. He said, brother, I like to eat. He said, you a little too strict for me. And I said, but Elder, we want you here. We want you here. This is it's a discipline of you not participating and throwing your perception and attention into the somatic body, which is the death body, which is the lust body, which is the body that the Hindus call the kama rups, which means the body of lust. And the body of lust wants that ice cream, wants that chicken leg, that's the body that you've created, and that's the body that will die. But if you recede from that and you take less, you gain more. And that's the reverse psychology, the reverse illusion of this planet. The less you take in, the more life you process. The more you take in, the less connected you are with life around you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there may be a switch in the circuitry where some people defy that.
Mm-hmm.
But then they're just on automatic pilot. They're not receiving the true sense of the movement of spirit. They are just going on the memory of what they experienced before they came to that state, which is different.
When we look at the soma body,
Mm-hmm.
and we're talking about light, we're not getting away from it, because the Egyptians looked at the personality, for less of a better word, but the human entity as a fourfold construction.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the Ka, the Ba, the Ka-Ba.
Mm-hmm.
But couldn't you break that
Resh.
down? And
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people have the question of soul. What is soul? What is spirit? How do they enter? What are we? And I think maybe if we can look at the Egyptian concepts of how we are made up, we might begin to understand it, and we can see where the soma body you were talking about
Mm-hmm.
from ancient texts is just one body of many bodies that we have.
Yes, it is.
So
But
maybe
it's
you
the
can
lower
explain.
body. It's the lowest body. It's the body that needs the redemption. You see, the soma body is the body to be redeemed.
What are the other bodies? And maybe you can connect them with.
There are different bodies, that are based on vibratory rates outside of our perception.
Mm-hmm.
But there are one egg, as Don Juan says, this egg of awareness. And just like in any other, for instance, white light breaks down into sevenfold colors,
Mm-hmm.
we break down into 7 colors as well, or 7 energy grids that make up the physical composite that you see. The soul is simply a template of the experience of the spirit in flesh. It is the intermediary energy. It is the step-down matrix before the physical form. It is the library of experience for the spirit in the flesh, on matter, in the material world. And it becomes a weight to the spirit because if it goes through the realm of matter, it becomes extremely polluted. Because matter and spirit are connected by the thread of thought. And that thought is processed. The experience of the thoughts are processed upon the soul. And whatever is on the soul comes out on the physical body. You see. Mm-hmm. So the physical body and the soul are connected because that is where the soul spirit works its experience in matter out of itself. It goes in for experience. Mm-hmm. This whole thing that we're doing right here, you and me, the billions of others around us, is just in here for the experimentation of spirit. We are just here to participate in tangible things. It is only through here do we begin to elevate and become greater in the light, because unless you have gone down into the realm of matter, unless you have partaken of the infinite mother, which is matter, you would not know who you are. So the Father has to be seated in matter before the Father realizes the dual side of itself. Mm-hmm. And that's the resurrected Son, Heru. Okay? So if you look at the story of Osiris and Isis and Horus, which are the Greek names for Osar, Oset, and Heru, Set destroyed Osiris, encased him in a coffin or in a casing that he created specifically for him. Set represents what is called the Merkaba programming for our soul, for our spirit. So the trapping of Osiris is the trapping of the knowledge, the all pure knowledge of self in relationship to God as self and self as God, into this box we call matter. Isis is the mother who has the consciousness of Osiris, her husband, and she now goes seeking him. And who she represents now is the spirit of man seeking to, the physical man without the soul, seeking to redeem the soul within itself in matter, because she represents matter. So she is trying to find the spirit so she could release and interface herself with the spirit. Now she finds the coffin after it was encased inside of a tree. And there go that tree again. The tree of life. She takes the coffin, and then when the body is laying there dead, she does some magic to get the dig hard, stops on it, and then boom, here comes Heru. This Heru is the son of a dead man. So what does that tell you? Who's the only dead man here on this planet walking around? It's us. That's why the white or the Caucasoid woman is so preoccupied with the black male. That's why everybody is taking a piece of the 14 pieces that after that, remember Set destroyed Osiris because he found out what Isis had done. So he found the body, got it, and chopped that shit up into 14 pieces and scattered it. Now, you see the women. You remember Isis said, let me get all my sisters and you go out into the land and help me find these pieces. Well, this is why we're so fucked up now, because what the women doing now when they find the pieces of Osiris? Instead of bringing the bad boy to put them back together, she's using the piece. So the spirit of Osiris, which is supposed to be resurrected in the male, who's supposed to now come back and take over the throne so that she can stand behind him and support both of them, she's over there using the piece she found in careers and doing her thing to play football and box and shit. This is not the realm and the time of a woman. Everybody talking, we going into a female time for our female. No, that's bullshit. If that was the case, then why are all the women acting like men? We are not going into a female time. We are going into a time of the resurrected sun, which is Heru. And unless them females start bringing all the pieces back and resurrecting their men, and giving them back the dick that they had. Remember, they couldn't fight. They got all the pieces together except the dick. And she had to go and fashion a golden one for him. And that's what she's doing. She's using it for herself, on herself, and for herself.
How do you beat that?
Well, you see her.
I mean, you're going to get a lot of sisters at this point. They've been following us up to this point.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm going to get them more pissed off.
You're losing a lot of them.
No, it's all right. But a lot of them need to be lost. Like Oprah, their queen. So what happened is, we got caught up, the sisters got caught up in becoming Osiris rather than resurrecting Osiris.
So you're saying now the sisters out here now who's saying, I can do it on my own, I don't need no man, I can raise my children, my son. What I need a brother for?
That's right. Now she's just as crazy as she wants to be. Now you're going to see a backlash to that because the sisters are now craving to be with men. I'm getting it every day now. They know that something is wrong. The sisters who still got their own senses and their own instincts know something is wrong with the picture the way it is. You see, they've been hoodwinked by this recessive. And the recessive sicked his woman on everybody else, especially our woman. And now our woman is acting just like his woman. She's taking on recessive traits. She keeps boiling and oiling her hair till it's straighter than even the Chinese. And they can't get hair straighter than that. You see what I'm saying? Then you got, see, the whole story of Osiris has been twisted. All the sisters got a piece of Osiris and they all acting like Osiris. They're going out there and assuming the roles of men. What else is that except assuming the role of Osiris? And Osar. And they say, well, what is it? The sisters have to be the one that's doing it, and they went out to get the body of Osiris, and maybe that's what it is. No, it ain't that. The resurrection of Osar means that you have to resurrect the balance in nature. You can't balance yourself by acting like a man. You have to stabilize yourself. And I can definitely tell you that the sisters have taken the golden lingam and they're using it as the dildo on themselves because the incidence of lesbianism in black women today is off the charts. It is off the chart in Atlanta and in California. And every brothers are saying, sister, can we go ahead and get it on? Do you be with me or my woman? Well, I have another relationship with this sister. And that's what they're running into wholesale down there now. So you're going to tell me that this Osar situation is not off the hook? It's off the hook now. These sisters are bugging out. They don't know what to do with themselves. Now they're fucking each other and they're dildoing each other, eating each other. That is Osiris going crazy because you started to imbibe and take on the traits of Osiris.
Now, this is generated and perpetuated by whom and how?
Well, the interpretation. Remember, if you have the very person that's supposed to be working for the gathering of the pieces of our fragmented self to create the Osa energy, which is essentially to actually manifest the redeeming or the redeeming energy within you. The redemption is based upon a balance of energy, a new energy. The only way that the so-called redemption energy is going to come through is if the resurrected body of Osa and that which is the perfected body of Oset, or Ast, comes together. And the only way that you're going to create the redemption or the redeemer, which is within, is by bringing those two components together. But they must act in their capacity. Osiris can't act like Isis. He can't start donning on a skirt and start walking around to do the work of Isis. And Isis can't switch roles with Osiris. There are definite, if we're going to be working in the realm of matter, and we are dealing in the realm of matter, matter has specific rules of gender. And the specific rules of gender are not there to be interpreted based upon our own deficient and perverted sense of reality. And because we are listening and acting like the Caucasoid, we have a perverse and completely mutilated sense of ourselves and reality. In fact, we have created a mutation of a reality, a mutated reality that's based upon his own mutated self. And now, if you have people adopting that world paradigm and that worldview,